I told my daughter that there's no way I'd attend her wedding if her biological father is invited, but she says I'm stuck in the past because she doesn't know how she came to be. I would appreciate some advice on the current situation I'm in, and I hope an outsider's perspective might offer me some clarity. For some context, about 24 years ago, I was assaulted by a close friend and became pregnant as a result. I was inconsolable for months after the event. To make matters worse, I found out I was pregnant around 20 weeks, and where I lived at the time, it was illegal to have an abortion after the first trimester. My husband was truly my rock and support during that time, and I don't know how I would have managed if it weren't for him. He said we could give her up for adoption or I could keep the baby, and we would raise her like our other daughters. I decided not to give her up for adoption, but raising her was difficult. I'm half Polish and half German, and he's half German and half Russian. We both have light skin, light hair, and blue eyes, and we're quite tall. I'm around 178 centimeters tall, and he's 191 centimeters. However, our daughter Luna is about 160 centimeters tall, has dark hair, and an olive skin tone like her biological father. I often heard malicious comments about me being an unfaithful wife because it was obvious she wasn't my husband's child. It was especially hard for me when Luna was young because she resembled her father so much. My husband took care of our daughter most of the time, as I had terrible memories every time I saw her face from the moment I was sexually assaulted. As she grew older, it eased a bit, but I still suffered horrible panic attacks when I saw her in boyish clothing with short hair. Because I was prone to panic attacks, Luna ended up being closer to my husband than to me. Additionally, she often ended up getting a little more than her siblings from my husband as a sort of compensation for my guilt. We never told her she was the result of a sexual assault because I was too ashamed, and my husband didn't want her to feel different from her siblings. I often told her that her biological father and I had a fight and never spoke again. About 2 years ago, she took one of those DNA tests and discovered she had a relative in the system. This relative put Luna in contact with her biological father, and they started talking despite my protests. Apparently, he wanted to talk to me about something, so Luna tried to persuade me to talk to him. I let her know that her father and I should never be in the same room together. Now, Luna is marrying a lovely young man. Some of the COVID restrictions have been lifted, so she can have a decently sized wedding. The original plan was for my husband to walk her down the aisle, but he had a severe accident that left him in a wheelchair until his legs are strong enough to support his weight again. However, this isn't what she considers a perfect wedding day, so she invited her biological father to have the honor of being the father of the bride. Her wedding invitation not only invited my assailant, but also disregarded the man who raised her. Even though I or a bridesmaid could have walked her down the aisle, she thinks it wouldn't fit the wedding atmosphere. My husband looked so shocked and upset that she would even consider this, but I was furious. I have a visceral hatred for that man, and I made it clear that I wouldn't be anywhere near him at all. She told me that this is what she wants, and that she wouldn't change her mind, so I told her I wouldn't attend if he's there. She got upset and told me I shouldn't be stuck in the past, but I told her she doesn't know what happened between her biological father and me, so she shouldn't meddle where she doesn't belong. Although I feel terrible about what I said and how I said it, and I can't blame her for her birth or for not knowing what happened, since I never told her, I still feel that my wishes should be respected. If I say I don't want to be in the same room as someone, then I don't want to be. I'm okay with her contacting her father, I just don't want anything to do with him. Also, it's rude to replace your father with another man you've barely known for 2 years over something he couldn't control. Can anyone offer me a perspective I might not be considering? Has anyone faced this before, and if so, how did you handle it? Update 1. Before I start with the update, there are a few things I want to address. Many people have questioned why I didn't tell my daughter she was the product of a sexual assault. The only answer is that I felt ashamed of myself. For some context, before I married my husband, I was actually very close friends with my assailant. We grew up together in a small community, and our families were close. Even our parents wanted us to be together. He was always interested in me, but I didn't give him a chance until college. I ended the relationship with him and started dating my husband, but I never cut ties with him because we were so close. He would invite me over to his house for drinks. It was something normal for us. And when I started getting a little drunk, he raped me. I was very traumatized by the situation and tried to put him in jail, but I couldn't. He had a very good reputation, so everyone believed him, even my own mother. when he said I went to his house voluntarily and had sex with him. Eventually, I stopped pursuing him due to social pressure, which only got worse when I found out I was pregnant. Finally, I left that place with my husband and children to live elsewhere. After giving birth, my husband suggested therapy, but I was afraid of being judged again, so I decided to bury it and try to forget it. I've just realized that was the worst way to handle the situation, but it was the only way I knew, honestly. Moving on to the update, after reading all the advice I received, I decided to stop running and tell her everything. I called her to come home, and she did. First, I apologized for yelling at her for her suggestion because, in her mind, it was an innocent suggestion. I told her that I wasn't angry with her but with how quickly she was willing to replace her father because he was in a wheelchair, and that anger intensified when she mentioned her biological father. I apologized again for acting childishly and not like an adult. She asked me why I was so against her biological father being in the same place as me, and I simply told her everything, from our initial friendship to her forced conception. She didn't believe me, as some Reddit users predicted, but I can get a copy of the court case records and offer it to her if she needs it. She looked stunned, as if she wanted to believe me, but couldn't. I apologized for hiding all of this from her because I didn't know how to approach it. She told me she didn't believe me and that she would confirm with her biological father, so I told her to take all the time she needed to process everything. Later that day, she came back crying and apologizing for not believing me. We hugged and cried together, and I also apologized to her. It was therapeutic. We had a long talk, and I felt we were closer when we finished. She said she wanted to take me somewhere as a surprise to help me feel better in a couple of days, which I happily accepted. Yesterday, I met her at this little restaurant with a patio that had a private area for up to 4 people due to COVID-19. When she ran towards me and hugged me, she led me to the patio where her biological father was. She said he was there to apologize and start my healing process. I just wanted to leave, but he grabbed my hand, and all those memories I had tried to repress came flooding back. I started having a panic attack and lost my balance, and he tried to help me stand, which made everything worse. Honestly, I don't remember how I left, but I ended up in my car sobbing. I called my oldest son to pick me up because I wasn't in a state to drive at that moment. Today, my daughter called me upset because I ruined her surprise, but I was extremely angry with her. I asked her why she did that when she knows everything that happened between him and me, and she tried to use the excuse of my healing process, but I didn't accept it. She admitted that she wanted me to get used to him because he was going to walk her down the aisle along with my husband and do the father-daughter dance. I told her that while I loved her and respected her decision to be with him, I'm not willing to be where he is. She started complaining about how she wanted her entire family to be there, and I still haven't forgiven her, but I hung up the phone. My husband knows everything and supports me in not going to her wedding, but I don't want this. If my other children found out, they would support me and tell the rest of the extended family, which would lead to my daughter being disinherited by the family. I don't need advice on this because I will seek professional help anyway. One good thing that has come out of this is that I finally have the confidence to seek therapy. Thank you for listening to my rants and for commenting on my last post. Happy holidays. I hope you enjoy them with those you love. Update 2. It has been a while since I last posted on this website. I have some new updates for everyone who has been asking. I apologize for not responding to everyone in my direct messages, but I truly appreciate the support you all have given me during those difficult times. I'd like to share some good news before talking about what happened with my daughter. My husband can walk again, even if it's with a cane, but it's progress. We've been going to physical therapy to help strengthen his legs after his accident. It's good to see him happy and walking again. I've also been going to therapy and met this wonderful and sweet therapist. My therapist is so patient and kind. Since my husband and I started together a few weeks ago, she has been extremely helpful. Bless her and everyone who recommended therapy. I would have missed such a valuable experience, so my gratitude goes to all of you. As most of you advised, my therapist also recommended telling my other children about what happened with my youngest daughter. For reference, I have 3 other children, a 30-year-old son, a 27-year-old daughter, and another 27-year-old son. My eldest son is the only one who had a slight idea of what happened, but the other 2 were unaware. I was quite scared and anxious to tell them what happened, especially since my mother and other family members initially reacted negatively. I invited them to dinner about 2 weeks ago and told them everything that happened, from my youngest daughter's conception to what happened recently. They all stayed silent and looked at me, so I got a little nervous until my daughter started crying. It was very distressing for her, and my 2 sons were furious with my youngest daughter and her father. They asked why I hadn't told them before, and I said I was simply afraid of how they might have reacted. My husband took them out of the dining room to talk, while my eldest daughter and I just cried together. When my sons and husband returned, they apologized for leaving early and left. My eldest daughter wanted to stay the night with me, but she left early in the morning. I didn't hear from them until last Wednesday. I was on Facebook when I saw my eldest daughter's post calling out my youngest daughter for not only ignoring the man who raised her, but also for taking sides with her angry mother and re-traumatizing her. My sons made similar posts, dragging her name through the mud. I received many direct messages, but I didn't want anything to do with them, so I deleted the app from my phone. Since I don't like people knowing about my personal life, I asked my kids to delete the post. They said they did, but I haven't re-downloaded the app to find out. The man who would have been my youngest daughter's husband came to my house with his mother to apologize. He told me that he broke off the engagement because he couldn't be with someone who treated her parents like that. His mother let me know how disgusted she was with my daughter's actions and that someone like her would never be part of their family. Honestly, I was surprised by all the support I've received. It's one thing to get support online, but getting support in real life was surreal for me. I'm a little disappointed because I wanted my daughter's ex-fiancé to join the family, as he's a charming and sweet guy, but he has boundaries in a relationship that my daughter unfortunately crossed. As for my youngest daughter, she's furious with me. She sent me a nasty voicemail saying that I ruined her life, her friends, and her fiancés, and I basically cut her off. Needless to say, I felt terribly guilty because I tried to avoid this situation at all costs. I went through what she's experiencing, and I know exactly how she feels. I told my therapist about this, and she said the difference is that while I was the victim, my daughter brought this on herself. My therapist is probably right, but I can't shake this feeling of dread. I tried calling my daughter, but once I heard her father on the line, I hung up. He made sure to inform me that my daughter is depressed because of my actions. I feel terrible for treating my daughter this way. My husband says I should focus on myself, and I'm trying, but I just can't stop worrying. I don't think my daughter is safe when she's with her biological father. That's everything that's happening in my life right now. To everyone asking, thanks for listening to me, and thanks again for the advice. I really appreciate everything. Update 3. I haven't posted on this social network in a while, but what happened warrants it. My youngest daughter came home crying the other day. I opened the door because, after all, she's my daughter and was crying. Besides, I was worried about her being with her biological father. So I let her in, and we sat in the living room together. At first, she looked a bit off, but once she composed herself, she started talking. If you remember, her biological father said he wanted her to talk to him, and I refused. They even ambushed me at a restaurant, which is when I fainted. So I never knew what he wanted to tell me, nor did I want to know, as there was nothing interesting he could say to me. But for the curious, and for some who guessed in the comments and needed confirmation, yes, he wanted to tell me his version of events, which is very different from mine. But back to my daughter, she started by apologizing for not believing me and thinking I had exaggerated. Her biological father had told her that things didn't happen the way I recounted, and that it was actually consensual between us. That's why she saw her father as a normal person in quotes, despite the horrific act he committed against me. But now she had found out everything because, apparently, I wasn't his only victim. I don't even know if I was the first. My daughter found this out thanks to one of the victims, who reached out to her on social media when she saw photos of my daughter and her biological father that she had been posting on her profile. The victim didn't know that my daughter was the product of a rape, she just wanted to tell her what kind of man her father was. That's when she started thinking that maybe what I had told her could be true, and what her biological father said might not be. That was a few days ago, and she's terrified because she's really scared of being with that person now. She had been avoiding answering his messages and calls, but since she hadn't, her biological father had told her he was going to visit her that day, so she ran home to avoid seeing him in person, especially alone. Honestly, I'm not sure if he could do something like what he did to me, since she's his daughter, but now that I think about it, I'm not sure. I thought the same when I was friends with this person, and we all know how that ended. She's been staying at home for a few days, and now we're thinking about what our next step with him will be. Update 4. Well, A couple of weeks have passed, and I think it's time to tell you what has happened. First, my daughter told him that she didn't want to have anything more to do with him in a message, as she knew the truth about me and also about the other girl. She then proceeded to block him, and, luckily, in all this time, he hasn't tried to contact her, which is a relief because it scared him enough not to try anything with her. Although she's now back living at her house, I'm still worried that this man might go or try something. Anyway, my husband bought some security cameras and plans to install them in the coming days. That will make her feel safer. She also tried to make things right with her ex-fiancé, who said he understood the whole situation but wasn't ready to leave everything behind and go back to wedding plans, and didn't even know if he ever would be. She tried to convince me to talk to him, to make him see reason. But I told her I wasn't going to get involved in that, and she seemed to understand. I suggested she go to therapy too, as it mustn't be easy knowing your biological father did what he did. Anyway, that's all for now. In case something new happens, I'll come here to tell you. Update 5. I wish I hadn't heard anything more about my youngest daughter's biological father, but that's not the case. He showed up at my daughter's house yesterday afternoon. First, he knocked on the door, and since she didn't dare answer, he shouted that he knew she was home because her car was parked outside. Plus, he knew she gets home from work around that time, so he figured she might be at the house. My daughter called me immediately, and since my husband had been installing the cameras, we also had access to them from our phones. So we watched, and there he was standing there. Even on a small screen and at a distance, the image alone made me very nervous. So my husband, who luckily is better after his accident, closed the app and quickly drove to my youngest daughter's house. We're only 10 minutes away by car, so it didn't take him long to get there. He was standing at the door and my husband told me he asked him to leave, that no one in our family wanted to see him ever again. He said that she was his daughter too, and that he wasn't leaving until he could talk to her because I had filled her head with lies. That made my husband, who isn't an aggressive person, very angry, so he started struggling with him at the door of the house. Of course, he didn't hit him. He just wanted him to leave because he was on her property and wasn't allowed to be there. Finally, he managed to get him off the property, and he ended up leaving. He then went inside my daughter's house and made sure everything was okay. He also brought her home because he didn't want to leave her alone. Even though she was better, she was a little scared. Now we're talking to a lawyer to see if we have a case to file a restraining order against him, as it's certainly a too stressful situation for both of us. Update 6. Well, we've gotten the restraining order, although we hope it won't be necessary because he hasn't returned to my daughter's house during all this time. Even her brothers have found out about all this, and have told her that she can call them day or night if he shows up again. But my sons are more of the acting type than talking, which worries me because something bad could happen. But at least I feel better knowing they're there to protect their younger sister. I wish my daughter hadn't opened Pandora's box, but that's how life is sometimes.